Hey everyone, welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm Julia Beauchamp. I am here with Network World reporter John Gold, and we are going to be talking smart city IoT and maybe some more practical use cases for IoT in cities, on farms, in life. Stick around. Hey John, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And so I want to talk smart cities and smart city IoT. Smart cities sort of sound to me like we're all going to be flying around in cars, or it sounds very futuristic to me, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have to be all futuristic. So can you tell me a little bit about what sort of makes a city smart?
Well, to be fair, it's already starting to seem pretty futuristic to me, but basically smart cities, when people say that, they're talking about, applying IoT tech to just various problems. They're pretty spread out, just that are common to urban living. Think like smart parking meters, that can all talk back to a central location and to handle who's parked here. They can track things like usage to see where you might need more parking or not so much.
How about like if your parking meter's like you haven't refilled the meter?
I'm not sure. I think that actually, no. Now that I think about it, there are apps like that out there. I'm not sure those are necessarily an IoT thing, but I'm pretty sure that there would be that kind of possibility in the pipeline.
Sure, yeah. So it doesn't. So we're not going to be all flying around in cars, which
not for a while
yet. But that doesn't mean that there aren't cities that are really trying to find practical uses for IoT. But these practical uses, like, they can seem really great in theory. I mean, at first mention, it sounds helpful to have, for exactly IoT in IoT sensors and parking meters saying, yep, this person has been parked here this long. Or another, that's also a great one. Yeah, we need more parking in this place, which I feel like is probably a pretty common city occurrence. But just because they exist doesn't always mean that they're all sort of they're not all perfect, and they're certainly not always secure. So what are some steps and concerns that someone, let's say working for the city of New York City, should be thinking about when it comes to securing IoT?
Well, it's the security issue is mostly the same as the security issue in any kind of IoT, that they're trying to blend a bunch of different types of products from a bunch of different companies into some sort of more unitary framework, and that just gives you a lot of points to cover. So just it might happen that one particular device, like a security camera in a public place, is configured in a incorrect way, and all of a sudden a lot of other stuff is vulnerable. Smart metering can go wrong like that too. Like I say, just lots of attack surfaces is broadly what the problem is.
What I also find really interesting about IoT and infrastructure IoT is sort of taking these really old systems, like, for example, maybe an electrical grid, and then making that smart, to say. And how do you even go about that, bringing something that's so, we've had electricity for a while now, bringing something that's sort of traditional and old, we're all used to it, into something that's now, say, smart?
Very carefully is the short answer. As we said, there's a lot of security issues around this. So, you have to sort of very carefully graft, modern commands, industrial control software onto something like an electrical grid, and it's got to be, access to that obviously has to be really, really carefully controlled. A lot of, the thing about, utility and manufacturing and all that sort of, sectors like that, is that they've had, sort of rudimentary, industrial control systems on them for a really long time, like dating back to 70s maybe. And so, there's some possibilities there already. It's just a matter of getting, something like that to talk to, a modern IP-based, sort of control system.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But because it obviously is a really big, daunting task. And I would think for, if you have a really big, very modern city where you also just have a lot of people paying taxes, it seems that maybe it wouldn't be as difficult. You can find the funding for it, and you can make sure that you really have these dedicated security experts. But I would imagine that for a smaller city, maybe a more suburban city, even a rural city, that would be actually quite a difficult task.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds right to me. I don't know the details of, precisely how these things get funded. I think a lot of times, sort of new projects like this will tend to be, partnerships with, Verizon or whoever
okay.
who's got like something to show off, or something they want to be able to talk up. Like, and actually Boston itself has like a traffic. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. It's like traffic monitoring and sort of analytics, and that I believe Verizon is actually working on with them.
Very cool. But now, just because there's all these cities that are sort of pushing for IoT, that doesn't necessarily mean they're getting it right. Like you say, there are a lot of
Yes.
security issues. But good news if you're a local mayor, you don't need to hook up your whole city's electrical grid to IoT. If you want to incorporate IoT, there's some more practical use cases for
Very true.
one that you have mentioned, which is pretty interesting. Now, I've seen these sort of Lime bikes popping up all over. We're based out of Boston. There's the blue bikes, which seem a little bit different because at least you're actually physically docking those. When it comes to the Lime bikes, the Lime scooters, the Bird scooters, they're not in Boston, but they're in surrounding cities. And anytime I have seen them, they're really all over. Like, they're really there, those scooters.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of items that you can just bikes, scooters. They don't have docking stations, so you can just sort of leave them wherever. And there are actual practical IoT use cases for sort of tracking these down, deterring theft. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. The way I think most of those work is, from like a connectivity and technology point of view, it's actually pretty simple. They've all got like just like a 3G modem in them and a GPS tracker. So they're all low jacked if you're thinking about stealing one. And I guess it's just we've got to the point where it's cheap enough to do that. Somebody feels like they can, offer that as the price point, and all the economics behind it work. And yeah, like I said, the ones with the docks actually work mostly the same way. Just cellular connectivity. There's I believe a GPS in those too. And the whole thing is, most of those are solar powered too, so there's less impact on the grid, I guess.
That's interesting. And you know what? I'm sure they are. Even the dockable ones are GPS activated, because I know that there's definitely a lot of data, and I would imagine that
They track all of that. Yeah,
They
there's
want-
a lot of information on usage. Like if you go to the Blue Bike site, they'll they have a little section that tell you the most used docks, the most trips for by location, by time, all that kind of thing. So they're definitely looking at that.
Yeah, and I'm sure they want to see where people are going,
Yeah.
and you can even see different cities within the greater Boston area sort of have their own types of bikes. So I've been in Boston proper and seen bikes from sort of surrounding, I don't really want to call them suburbs, but less big cities than Boston that are still in the immediate area.
Sure.
So people are taking these far away, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's true. So I actually ride a bike myself around Cambridge and Somerville, but I find them to be difficult bikes to ride, but it's a really great service that they've got available. Like I say, it sort of makes economic sense for just for commuting or running errands and so on. But
Sure. And so if you are, a local government, you can just get these bikes. You don't need to hook up your whole electrical grid, but also an option. But there's also other options. We don't have to talk about, cities. We can talk about maybe more rural communities, and farming are still also integrating IoT into their work. And farms especially, I find this really interesting, because farming to me, when you mention farming, you think, I can plant some basil in my backyard and grow it, but that's not the same. Farmers are obviously very large scale operations, and with a large scale operation, and you want to make tech simplify things.
mm-hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit about how IoT is sort of simplifying farming and making it even better for the consumer?
Yeah, it's funny, as I think I've probably mentioned before. It's the image of agriculture as an industry is pretty, it's very rural. It's probably pretty low tech. It's actually what a lot of people are doing with it these days is actually really, really sophisticated. They've got everything from soil sensors, really precise GPS, and automated, some kinds of automated driving things for for some of the equipment, the combines and threshers, and so they've got one, I believe, where I'm trying to think what it's called, like a mobile bin that where so you have a combine, it's harvesting and it's putting like finished grain into a bin, and it just like
Sure.
it's a little automated drone thing that drives along with you and like
Oh,
stays
cool.
information. Yeah, it's really neat. That used to be apparently a much more as you might imagine, a much more manual process than it is now.
Wow. That's really interesting. And it even can serve, there's sort of like livestock tracking, right? And
Yes, absolutely. I just wrote about a system that where it's like basically cows with biometric tags in their ears, so
So
tracking health
interesting.
and all that kind of thing. And of course, all of this, as with any IoT, is all feeding back into a data store somewhere where you can look at it, crunch it how you will, and learn things from it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming in, John. There's so
My
much.
pleasure.
Anytime we talk IoT, it's so interesting to me that there's just so much more than you think. Everything is really connected to IoT, and it's really pervasive in our whole life. I mean, if you want to go buy ground beef,
Yeah, it's tech. Yeah, it's just tech coming into your everyday life.
I think it's really interesting. So thank you so much, John. And thank you, everyone, for watching this episode of Tech Talk. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We'll have a few of John's stories linked below about Smart City IoT and a little bit more about these specific cases of IoT on Network World. So we'll link those below. And thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.